The courtroom fell silent as the gavel struck, but it was the sight of the frail old man, eyes milky with blindness, being led to the witness stand that gripped everyone's heart like a vice. At 87, Elias Hawthorne had lived through wars, losses, and the quiet erosion of time, yet nothing prepared him for the betrayal etched in the charges against his only son. As the prosecutor began, detailing how Elias had been swindled out of his life savings and family home, a collective gasp rippled through the room, not from the crime itself, but from the old man's first words, whispered yet resounding. "He is still my boy." Elias had been born in the dusty plains of Kansas in 1938, a time when the world was still healing from one Great Depression and hurtling toward another war. His childhood was marked by the simple rhythms of farm life, waking at dawn to milk cows, the scent of fresh hay mingling with his mother's homemade bread. But vision had always been his fragile gift. By age 10, the doctors diagnosed a rare degenerative condition, retinitis pigmentosa, that would slowly steal the light from his eyes. "You'll adapt, son," his father had said, clapping a rough hand on his shoulder. And adapt he did, learning to navigate the world through sound, touch, and an unyielding spirit. Marriage came young, to a girl named Clara, whose laughter was like wind chimes on a summer breeze. They built a life together on that same farm, raising crops and dreams. Their son, Samuel, arrived in 1965, a bundle of joy that filled Elias's darkening world with purpose. Even as his sight faded completely by his 40s, Elias poured his love into Samuel, teaching him to fish by the river using only the feel of the line, to fix engines by ear, and to value honesty above all. "A man's word is his legacy," he'd say, his voice steady as the earth beneath them. Clara's death from cancer in 1995 shattered Elias, leaving him alone with Samuel, who by then was a restless young man chasing city lights. Samuel moved to Chicago, promising to visit, but the calls grew sparse. Elias, now fully blind, managed the farm with hired help, his savings tucked away in a trust for Samuel's future. He imagined his son building a family, perhaps returning one day to the land that had nurtured them both. But life, as Elias knew, had a way of twisting paths. Years blurred into one another, marked by the creak of his rocking chair on the porch and the occasional letter from Samuel, always laced with tales of struggle and pleas for money. "Just a loan, Dad," Samuel would say over the phone, his voice slick with desperation. Elias, his heart soft as aged leather, wired funds time and again, dipping into the nest egg he'd built from selling off parcels of the farm. He never questioned the story-soft bad investments, medical bills, or failed businesses because love blinded him more than any disease ever could. One crisp autumn morning in 2023, a knock echoed through the empty house. It was a lawyer, papers in hand, informing Elias that the farm his home for over 8 decades had been sold. Samuel had forged documents, claiming power of attorney during one of Elias's hospital stays for a minor fall. The proceeds, over $500,000, vanished into Samuel's accounts, funneled into gambling debts and fleeting luxuries. Elias sat there, the world spinning in darkness, feeling the betrayal like a knife twisting in his chest. "Why, Sam? Why?" he whispered to the empty room, tears tracing paths down his wrinkled cheeks. The community rallied around him. Neighbors, many of whom he'd helped through hard times with loans or advice, pooled resources to find him temporary lodging in a small apartment in town. The local sheriff, a man Elias had known since boyhood, pushed for charges: fraud, elder abuse, forgery. Elias resisted at first, his paternal love warring with the pain. "He's my blood," he'd murmur. But as months passed, the weight of loss pressed heavier. The farm wasn't just land. It was memories of Clara's garden, Samuel's first steps, the echo of family laughter now silenced. In the quiet of his new, unfamiliar space, Elias reflected on his life. He'd fought in Vietnam, losing friends to the jungle's horrors, yet returned to rebuild. Blindness had taken his sight, but not his vision for a better tomorrow. Now this. He prayed nightly, seeking strength, and in those moments, a resolve formed. Not for revenge, but for truth. The trial date loomed, and Elias prepared, his mind sharp as ever, rehearsing words that would cut deeper than any accusation. As the case built, Whispers spread through the town. Samuel, arrested and out on bail, avoided contact, his once charming demeanor cracked by guilt or defiance. Elias heard the rumors. Samuel had a secret family in the city, a life built on lies. But Elias focused on healing, attending church where the pastor spoke of forgiveness as a balm for the soul. Let go, Elias, the pastor advised. But remember, justice tempers mercy. The day before the trial, an unexpected visitor arrived at Elias's door. It was Martha, Samuel's ex-wife, whom Elias hadn't seen in years. She burst in with apologies, her voice trembling. "I didn't know until recently," she said, clasping his hands. Martha revealed she'd left Samuel a decade ago after discovering his addictions, but had stayed silent for their daughter's sake. Now, with the trial public, she felt compelled to speak. "He manipulated me too, Elias. But you deserve better." Her words ignited a spark in Elias, a twist in his understanding. Samuel wasn't just flawed. He was broken, perhaps from wounds Elias had never seen. Martha's presence shifted everything. She offered to testify, sharing documents of Samuel's past deceptions. Elias, touched by her courage, felt a surge of empathy not just for himself, but for those Samuel had hurt along the way. It humanized the betrayal, turning it from personal agony to a broader tale of redemption's possibility. As they talked late into the night, Elias realized forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was the ultimate strength. The trial opened in the county courthouse, a building Elias remembered from his sighted days as a grand, echoing hall. Now, it was a symphony of sounds, shuffling feet, murmured conversations, the judge's authoritative tone. Elias was called first, guided by a bailiff to the stand. The prosecutor laid out the evidence: meticulously forged signatures, bank records, the deed transfer. Samuel sat across the room, his breathing audible even to Elias's keen ears, ragged with tension. When it was time for Elias to speak, the room hushed. "Mr. Hawthorne," the prosecutor asked, "how did this make you feel?" Elias paused, his blind eyes seeming to stare into souls. "Like the ground gave way beneath me," he replied, voice cracking with emotion. He recounted the years of sacrifice, the love poured into Samuel, the shock of discovery. The jury leaned forward, captivated by his raw honesty. Then came the cross-examination. Samuel's lawyer, slick and aggressive, tried to paint Elias as forgetful, perhaps complicit. "Didn't you sign those papers willingly?" the lawyer pressed. Elias straightened, his cane tapping softly. "I trusted my son," he said firmly. "Trust isn't blindness, it's faith in humanity." The words hung heavy, stirring murmurs. As the day wore on, Martha took the stand unexpectedly, her testimony a bombshell. She detailed Samuel's history of deceit, from hidden debts to emotional manipulation. The courtroom buzzed. This twist exposed layers Elias hadn't fully grasped. Samuel's face, described later by onlookers, paled with shock. Elias listened, heart aching anew, but also enlightened. Martha's bravery underscored the human cost, amplifying the drama. By evening, as the session adjourned, Elias felt a profound shift. The betrayal wasn't isolated. It was a chain of pain that could be broken. He whispered a prayer for Samuel, hoping for change. The trial was far from over, but Elias's composure amid the storm inspired all who witnessed it. The revelations from Martha lingered in Elias's mind like echoes in a vast chamber, reshaping his view of Samuel not as a villain, but as a man ensnared by his own demons. The second day of the trial dawned with a tension that crackled in the air, journalists now crowding the halls, drawn by the human drama unfolding. Elias, seated in the front row, sensed the heightened energy, the rustle of notebooks, the flash of cameras muffled by court rules. Samuel was called to testify, his voice a shadow of the confident boy Elias remembered. Under oath, he admitted to the forgery, claiming desperation from mounting debts. "I never meant to hurt you, Dad," he said, words laced with regret that sounded genuine to some, rehearsed to others. The prosecutor tore into him, presenting emails and texts showing premeditation. Samuel crumbled, tears evident in his choked responses. Elias listened intently, each admission a fresh wound. Yet, in the pauses, he recalled happier times. Teaching Samuel to ride a bike, the boy's gleeful shouts piercing the air. Those memories clashed with the present, fueling a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sorrow, pity. The courtroom felt the pull too. Jurors shifted uncomfortably. Spectators whispered about the tragedy of family turned against itself. Midway through, another unexpected figure emerged: Elias's long-lost nephew, Thomas, whom no one had seen in decades. Thomas, a successful lawyer from New York, had read about the case online and flown in overnight. "Uncle Elias," he said, approaching during a recess, his voice warm with familiarity. Thomas revealed he'd been estranged due to a family feud. Elias had forgotten something trivial from the '80s involving land disputes. But seeing the story, Thomas felt compelled to help, offering pro bono assistance and emotional support. This twist invigorated Elias. Thomas's arrival wasn't just aid. It was a reminder that family extended beyond blood gone sour. They talked in a side room, Thomas describing his life, his regrets for staying away. "You've always been the rock, Uncle," Thomas said. Elias, touched, felt a surge of hope. Thomas joined the legal team informally, cross-examining witnesses with sharp precision, uncovering more of Samuel's schemes, including attempts to defraud others. The afternoon session intensified. A financial expert testified to the extent of the loss: Elias's savings depleted, the farm now in the hands of developers planning to raise it for subdivisions. Elias's heart sank at the thought. That land held Clara's ashes, scattered under the old oak tree. The emotion swelled, his hands trembling on his cane. When Elias was recalled for rebuttal, the questions turned personal. "Do you want your son punished?" the judge asked gently. Elias took a deep breath, the room poised on the edge. "Punishment won't bring back what's lost," he replied, voice steady. "But accountability might save him." Gasps echoed faintly. His words carried a depth that transcended vengeance. As day 2 closed, Elias reflected with Thomas and Martha over dinner at a quiet diner. Their conversations wove threads of shared pain and resilience. Martha spoke of raising her daughter alone, Thomas of his own battles with isolation. Elias realized betrayal had ripples, but so did kindness. He shared stories of his blindness, how it taught him to see with the heart. "Sight shows the surface," he said, "but feeling reveals the soul." The third day brought storms, both literal and figurative. Rain pounded the courthouse roof as witnesses paraded, neighbors attesting to Elias's generosity, bankers confirming the fraud. Samuel's defense painted him as a victim of circumstance addiction stemming from childhood pressures, perhaps even Elias's high expectations. It stung, but Elias remained composed, whispering encouragements to his supporters. A pivotal moment came when a psychologist testified on elder abuse's psychological toll. Describing isolation, loss of trust, the expert's words mirrored Elias's inner turmoil. Yet, Elias interjected softly during a break. "It's not just about me. It's about healing for all." His perspective shifted the narrative, emphasizing humanity over legality. Thomas's closing arguments that evening were masterful, weaving Elias's life story into a tapestry of endurance. "This man has faced darkness in every form," Thomas declared. "Yet he chooses light." The jury nodded, moved. Samuel, watching, seemed broken, perhaps for the first time truly remorseful. Elias ended the day in prayer, gratitude filling him for the unexpected allies. Martha and Thomas had become family anew, their presence a twist that softened the edges of betrayal. As thunder rumbled outside, Elias felt peace settling, knowing whatever the verdict, his response would define the legacy. The final day of the trial arrived under clearing skies, as if the heavens themselves anticipated resolution. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, seats filled with townsfolk, reporters, and even distant relatives drawn by the story's pull. Elias, flanked by Thomas and Martha, entered with quiet dignity, his cane tapping a rhythm of resolve. Closing arguments began. The prosecutor summed up the evidence with fervor. "This is not just theft, it's the shattering of sacred bonds." Samuel's lawyer pleaded for leniency, citing rehabilitation potential. Then, in a rare move, the judge allowed Elias a personal statement before deliberations. The room stilled, all eyes on the blind man who had become the heart of the proceedings. Elias rose slowly, his voice emerging like a river carving stone steady, profound. I've lived 87 years in darkness, but I've seen more than most. I've seen the beauty in a son's first cry, the pain in a wife's goodbye, the cruelty in greed's grasp. He paused, emotion thickening the air. Samuel, you took my home, my savings, but you can't take my love. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. A collective gasp swept the courtroom, jurors covering mouths, spectators wiping tears. The judge banged the gavel for order, but the impact lingered. Elias continued, punish him as the law sees fit, but remember, we're all flawed. Let this be a lesson in compassion and second chances. His words, laced with humanity, transformed the trial from retribution to reflection. The jury deliberated for hours, the wait agonizing. Elias sat outside, Thomas describing the scene. People approaching with handshakes, sharing stories of their own family strife. Martha held his hand, her presence a balm. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, with a recommendation for probation and restitution, the room erupted in mixed reactions. Samuel, head bowed, mouthed, I'm sorry, across the divide. Sentencing followed swiftly. The judge, moved by Elias's plea, imposed community service, therapy, and full repayment over time. Mr. Hawthorne's grace has tempered justice today, the judge intoned. Samuel approached Elias post-verdict, escorted by guards. Dad, he began, voice breaking. Elias reached out, touching his son's face. Start anew, son. That's my wish. In the aftermath, life reshaped. The farm couldn't be reclaimed, but with Thomas's help, Elias sued the buyers successfully, regaining a portion of the land as a community preserve. He moved into a cozy cottage there, surrounded by nature's whispers. Martha and her daughter visited often, forging bonds. Thomas relocated part-time, mending old rifts. Elias's story spread, inspiring articles and talks on forgiveness's power. He spoke at churches, his message simple. Betrayal tests us, but response defines us. At 87, blindness had taken his eyes, but not his sight into the human soul. He found joy in small things, the birdsong at dawn, laughter of new friends, the knowledge that love, even wounded, endures. Years later, Samuel, reformed through therapy, returned humbly. Their reconciliation was tentative, built on honesty. Elias embraced him, whispering, welcome home. The twist of fate had woven a tapestry richer than before, proving that from deepest pain blooms profound grace. But the story didn't end there. Life, in its infinite weave, had more threads to unravel. Elias, now 88, sat on his cottage porch, the preserved land a sanctuary for reflection. Samuel's restitution payments arrived monthly, symbols of amends. Yet, a new challenge emerged, health concerns. Doctors diagnosed early dementia, shadows creeping into his sharp mind. Thomas, ever vigilant, arranged care, but Elias resisted institutionalization. I've faced worse alone, he'd say. Martha's daughter, young Lily, became a frequent visitor, her energy a spark. At 15, she interviewed Elias for a school project on resilience, recording his tales. Grandpa Eli, she called him, igniting warmth in his heart. One evening, a letter arrived from an unknown Cinderin Old War buddy, presumed dead, who had read about the trial. The man, Victor, revealed shared secrets from Vietnam, including a pact to watch over each other's families. Victor's arrival was the final twist, bringing artifacts from the past, medals, photos Elias could feel described. You saved me once, Victor said. Now let me help. Together, they formed a circle of support. Victor shared stories that filled gaps in Elias's memory, easing the dementia's fog. Samuel, witnessing this, deepened his commitment, volunteering at elder centers. The community preserve hosted events, Elias as honorary speaker, his voice inspiring generations. As seasons turned, Elias's health waned, but his spirit soared. On his 90th birthday, surrounded by Thomas, Martha, Lily, Victor, and a repentant Samuel, he reflected, life cheats us all, but our responses echo eternity. The gathering gasped at his wisdom, much like the courtroom years prior. In his final days, Elias passed peacefully, cane in hand, a smile on his lips. His legacy? A foundation funding elder protection, seeded by restitution and donations. The farm bloomed anew, a testament to forgiveness's harvest. The end, yet in hearts, to be continued.